Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest The Doctor Will See You Now. Hope everyone's well and hope everyone's having a good read. Now, if you are looking for the next good read, I would like to recommend this book to you, Robert Craven's A Kind of Drowning. So, Robert Craven, welcome back into the consultation room.
Thank you.
It's I think it's just over a year since we were last able to meet like this.
Yeah, and it's been such a short year as well. Well, in some ways long, other ways very short. But
Another
yeah,
way short,
seems like yesterday.
doesn't it? Doesn't it? Now, for anybody who didn't catch that first consultation, um, I first met Robert at British Scotland. I think it was 2019, was it?
Yeah, it was 2019. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And we just struck up a bond. I was, instantly grabbed by the pitch that he put out, and since then it's been great. The back and forth that we've had.
yeah,
Um, Again, for people who aren't familiar with your writing, there are 5 books to be had in the Ava Molinar Wartime Adventure series.
yeah,
There's the fabulous The Road of a Thousand Tigers with
yeah.
Sebastian Holt, the protagonist, a Bond style kind of
Very much a Bond book. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And then of a small steampunk novella, The Mandarin Cipher, which is it's a favorite of mine. It's a very short book, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, I'm kind of into Victoriana and steampunk, but it did well as well. So
Beautiful,
all good.
beautiful, beautiful. But the novel that we're going to talk about today, it's your eighth novel, A Kind of Drowning, featuring PJ Crow. And so, first of all, I want to ask you about the origins of this novel because I read that it developed from a short story. So, can you tell us a little about that?
Sure, no problem. It was a short story, and it was a sort of a tragic comedy. I wanted to sort of put a character in a very, very low point, but through the process of trying to get across his tiny apartment, a series of mishaps occurred that eventually lead to him tumbling out through the door of the apartment. And it got quite a lot of laughs because it was all internalized how he coped with it. And then I sort of parked it for a while, and I brought out Eagles Hunt Wolves, and then we had the lockdown, and then I had a sort of double whammy that I was made redundant almost on the month that the lockdown
Mm.
began. So I had this free time to really try something completely different out of my comfort zone. And I had another look at this short story, and I had another character, Down syndrome girl, in a horror book that never ever developed. And I thought if I could somehow marry these two disparate characters together, I might have a story. And I looked back at the comedy and then I thought, why is this guy here? And then I turned it into a cop who's fallen on hard times. He's in a crisis. His crisis evolves into him being filmed attacking another man and bringing the whole Garda police force, as we have over here, into disrepute, and he's suspended without pay, and he's thrown out of the marital home, and I've dropped him right into the middle and the reader into this crisis.
Mm,
From this
mm,
crisis, he uncovers or begins to investigate the tragic death of this girl, and there I had my story.
mm, mm. I again, thank you for sharing your process with us, and that fusing together. I wonder, given the last 18 months, and every author, has a different story to tell of how they've dealt with lockdown in various places. Um, For you, was it a chance for you to be able to, it sounds like it was, to be able to focus and concentrate and develop your writing?
Yeah, it was. We for the best part of nearly 3 months there was a 2 kilometer limit around all the everywhere we lived. So I only had a beach to walk down around or around the area. And I started looking at the scenery. You live in a place for 20 years, but you never really look at it properly. And I live in this little seaside town, and I thought this would be a perfect backdrop, a perfect environment for Crow to inhabit. So yes, I had so much time. I was able to really mine down into the whole area, made the area itself and the island of Inishcarrig
Mm,
almost central to the story as well. The island became a character in its own way.
and so I mean, again, from what you're sharing with us, um, it makes me think that despite limitations and limits, that writing, can still develop, in such a fabulous way that,
Yeah.
I think, so long as there's maybe electricity if you're on the laptop, or there's still, there's a pen and paper
Yeah, it
at
was pretty
hand.
much pen and paper for most of it, and then I just type it up. So I'm quite disciplined for the past sort of 10 or 15 years. I get up at 5 every morning. I usually write, whether I'm scribbling or working on something. I usually write for about 2 hours. I'm lucky to get those 2 hours every day. And if you do that for 6 months, you have a book. But because we had nearly 18 months of lockdowns sitting in, I had so much time to really go at it in a professional manner
Mhm.
and edit it. And the draft that you're holding in your hand is about the 14th version of the book.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a very very hard process in one way, but very rewarding because I had so much time to really get stuck into the story and develop the characters. The hardest part I think of writing is making a character, any kind of character, believable, putting
Mm,
flesh on the
mhm,
bones, and try to, cliches inevitable, but try not to make them obvious. And I think I've done that with all the characters in the book. They're not obvious. They're slightly dark in each and every way. And they've also got good points as well. Even the villain has a sense of humor.
mhm.
So I try to bring
Yeah,
that into it.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you about, and I might be right, I might be wrong, but it would appear from the style with which you write this book, you seem to have been influenced by those classic noir, or like Private Eye
Yeah,
characters. Is
yeah,
that
yeah.
true? Do you
It is
enjoy?
true.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Elmore Leonard and certainly Glitz and Maximum Bob. They would be two, that kind of breezy kind of Mickey Spillane, take the reader in, but have a chat with it kind of thing. And Ed McBain, I love him too.
Mm.
But also, I'm a big fan of Mick Herron. I
Oh,
think he has a
yeah,
fabulous style of writing.
without a doubt. Yeah.
I love what he does. But there's other writers. I mean, to go back to the Sherlock Holmes, I still read the Sherlock Holmes stories. I love Edgar Allan Poe. I remember reading Murders in the Rue Morgue when I was about 9 or 10, and having nightmares after it because you have an orangutan with a cutthroat razor. I just couldn't get my head around it. But the same thing, the detective examines, explores, and explains. So yeah, I'm very much into, I like reading dense books and deep books, but I like to switch off with a good kind of PI detective story.
Mm, mm. So our detective here, because of course, well, disgraced as he is, and on unpaid leave while he gets processed. Um, I don't know the inspiration behind this PJ Crow. Where did he come from?
That's a good question. Every writer is, when he writes fiction, to quote Doris Lessing, his autobiography, and there is quite a bit of Crow in me. Also, a bit of my dad. As I
Hmm.
started spending more time on it, uh, I saw quite a bit of both my father and myself, and I know a couple of other guys who are all sort of in their 50s, have lost their jobs or for various
Mm,
reasons have had this security that they've known pulled out from under them. And as I said, I had the chance to get out where I was, and I took it. So it wasn't so much a shock to the system as an opportunity, which I treated it as to just write. So Crow is a combination of people I know with bits of me, and bits of my dad were actually coming into it from time to time. Some of the turns of phrases, the manner. And the man loved the bookies. He couldn't pass a bookie shop without going in. And I wanted to give Crow that kind of quirk.
Because I wondered, as you go through the book, and I'm thinking, I sh I shouldn't like this character. I think he's the kind of man, sadly, that I think if I were to meet in real life, I would think, oh no, 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 no. But he possesses those redeeming qualities.
Yeah, he had to have that.
Yeah, that in the end, I'm there, with the book going, oh, good on you. Yes, yeah. And it's almost like I think I can forgive you
Yeah.
all those foibles that would just, yeah. And I wondered, how did you, I mean, you mentioned just now the idea of, maybe writing a cliche. I mean, were you aware when you set out to create this character that, that flawed protagonist, it's so typical. How did you sort of like set about ensuring that you didn't just write same old, same old?
That's a good question. Well, as I said, there was about 14 drafts, and I would certainly say by the first 5 or 6 drafts, I was working very hard on him. I wanted more of his character to come out through his dialogue than his actual
Hmm.
internal. So how he perceives the world around him is extremely fractured. And what I wanted to do was trying to almost make the dialogue disjointed, kind of fragmented, where you get this idea of a man trying to jolt himself back to some sort of life. And I sort of modeled him on people that I've met over the years. And I tried to sort of make him as rounded as possible. It's probably that's again a cliche, but I wanted to make him as solid, almost like a sculpture, kept piling on other bits and pieces and then tearing bits off until I got a character that, will appear in another book and may have another book revolving around
Hmm.
him again. But when I set out to write his backstory, I deliberately put him into crisis from the word go, and then how he comes back out of it. Gives testament to the man, his nature, and how he is still a policeman at the end of it all.
Definitely. But there is one aspect that totally intrigues me, because every so often, um, and it's all around flora and fauna, he's spouting the Latin names for plants and
Yeah,
animals. And
yeah, yeah.
how, why did you choose to give him this? How did this come about that this is such a part of the way he sees things?
Well, one of his quirks I want to do is that even though he's a detective inspector, he's very well educated. So his backstory is that he's been educated by the Jesuits. He's gone to university, but each time he goes to school, his abrasive, peppery personality lands him either expelled, thrown out, or just ignored. So he carries a bit of a chip on his shoulder that he does come from quite a comfortable, privately educated background. And he cannot help but notice things around him. And he is fascinated by books and literature. And he's an educated man. He might be very coarse and very rough, but he needs to have that little bit of something that makes him separate from the rest of them. And I deliberately did that. I had him uh, quoting different types of flora and fauna. And it's a default thing that even though he's a very broken man, he still defaults back to the things that built him in the first place.
Maybe that's, I mean, that's one of the things that, you know, in the end, I think, yeah, I identify a lot with him in more than one way, and not probably things that we can discuss in public. But yeah, I recognized something of myself in this man. Definitely,
Yeah, well,
definitely.
he's popular with women readers as well. I'm lucky that the sales that I've had, he's appealed to everybody.
Yeah,
I've had a
yeah.
few messages who have said from readers I wouldn't expect to read the kind of into the Ava series, into the gung ho
Mhm,
heroine, but they kept saying, "Oh, I loved Crow. I
mhm.
I loved him, but I didn't love him." So
Yeah,
that's you feel as a writer, you've got somewhere when you get that feedback.
definitely. I more recently, talking to authors and saying, the idea of I think when you don't have to create characters that people think, oh, I really like them, to create a powerful, well drawn character. I think it's okay to create characters that we don't like.
Yeah, 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 and you have more fun with it. I think I don't know how many crime writers or writers in general will say, but writing my material, I always had more fun with the villains than I had with the heroes. And this time I got to have fun. You should enjoy the process. I had a lot of fun creating Crow. I'd write things and burst out laughing, go, no,
Mhm,
I can't put that into a book. But you could imagine what he says
mhm,
aside under his breath,
mhm,
and he was a joy. He was a revelation, because when you set out to write anything, I heard a great description once about how a character appears. It's almost like a ghost on your shoulder. And I
mhm,
could almost say, right, I have Crow. And then I could imagine this guy sitting beside me in a pub somewhere with his pint and his newspaper and his observations of the world. I mean, you go to any pub, you meet characters like that. So he was a joy to create. I had a lot of fun with him.
Lovely. There's another character that appears at the beginning of the book, and I have to tell you, when I was reading it, it was like, this is this has been the character of my lockdown, and it's the fox. Uh, uh,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I've read so many novels where foxes appear. I've had foxes appearing in real life more than I've ever seen, and I know
yeah,
lockdown
yeah,
will have helped them to
yeah, yeah,
emerge.
yeah. The urban foxes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I just wondered. I mean, why a fox? It could have been a cat. In that the circumstances, and there was plenty of gulls,
Yeah,
around the
yeah.
place where he's living. So it could have been the gulls. What do foxes mean to you?
That's a good question. Fully enough, I go back to the old adage that there is no piece of writing ever wasted. So I
Mm,
had
mm,
Crow from one book, I had Thea Farrell from another book, and I wrote a short, tiny little story about a fox. Foxes, I just think, I'm really anti-blood sports. I really object to fox hunting, and I just think that. Bringing a highly intelligent animal like a fox in. Cats are great. You could have had a crow. You could have had like seagulls feature, because I live by the
mm,
sea. Seagulls are a fact of life. But I find foxes highly intelligent. And there's a good friend of mine. He's long past now, but his name is Quigley. And Quigley in the book is very much this man I sort of was apprenticed to
mm,
and worked with. And he talked about the time he was salmon fishing. And he had his salmon all laid out, and then he turned his back for a second, turned around, and he saw a fox running off with one of the salmons draped over its shoulder, over a hedgerow and gone. And he always repeated that story. I think I heard it once, I heard it a million times. That stayed with me. And oddly enough, the fox connected through the character Quigley, because then I started thinking about the things that he used to say. So it came about through the creation of a character. And I wanted also, it's the classic kind of sort of film trick, the pet the dog moment, where this is the point where you start liking Crow because he cares so much for this fox. It's
mm,
a slight spin on the pet the dog. It's a standard motif, if you will.
mm.
Borderline cliche, I will admit, but I think I got away with it.
Yeah, I think you did. I think you did. Now, because of the character Thea and that swimming theme that is
Yeah,
involved, and water in general, whether it be at the harbour side or out in the water. Um, are you a swimmer?
no. I'm an appalling swimmer, I'll be honest
Mhm.
with you. True story, for my 50th birthday, I got sailing lessons down in the local sailing club, which was great. We learned how to put the boats together. They were these little 8 foot kind of fiberglass boats that you sat into. And we put the sails up, and I was launched merrily out into the estuary, which is quite narrow but also quite deep. And I spent most of the time in the water, not on the boat. It kept capsizing and I kept falling over. And I got absolutely terrified. So I found myself in a situation where I was hauled up like a drowned seal into the rescue boat and brought back to shore. So if I was scared of water before I got in, I'm absolutely terrified of it now.
Say no more, say no more. I just
I've no
wonder,
sea legs,
no,
absolutely none whatsoever.
no. Um, I'm at the moment, when I get a book from an author, and I'm always intrigued by those citations at the start, and of course in the kind of drowning, um, there's one that talks about the fear of water, deep bodies of water, and that's why I asked you about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Then you have this quote, and I'm not sure that my pronunciation of the person who said it, Vola Soyinka.
I think it's Wally Soyinka. He's a Nigerian playwright.
Okay, thank
I
you,
think it's
thank you.
close enough. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I'll be honest.
and it says, "What a fearful thing it is when the voyager sets forth, but a curse remains behind."
Yeah, it's a great quote. I love it.
Isn't it? Isn't it just? And I think in a way, I think it sums up, the premise of the story, that what has happened,
Yeah,
uh, to PJ Crow, and how he has to set on. It is a story of redemption in a way. This, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. Well, when I created Abasidi O'Hare, the taxi driver, she's based on a friend of mine who is from Nigeria, and
Uh-huh.
she's very forthright, very businesslike. And that quote comes from Act One from Wole Soyinka's Death and the King's Horseman, and it's quoted by the mother of the market. And when I saw Mother of the Market, I saw that, I thought straight away of my friend Stella from Nigeria. And then I thought, well, she has a role to play. So she ferries Crow down, if you will, toward this town of Rosscarrig. And after he's resolved the situation, she ferries him back. She's the ferryman, the ferry
Mm-hmm.
woman, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big fan of that play. I think there's so much in it that it talks about duty, loyalty, and also the fact you cannot avoid your destiny. And Crow cannot avoid being a policeman on what he believes is a tragedy, but he knows it's something else.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, I wanted to ask you, given that this is the eighth, your eighth creation,
Yeah,
and how do you feel? I mean, apart from the settings and things, but how do you feel that this differs from your previous work?
I think it is certainly more personal. When I wrote the Ava series or the Holt series or the Mandarin Cipher, it's, I suppose, entertainment. It's something I wanted to do, and I'm very happy that I did it. But when I finished the book, A Kind of Drowning, and I held it in my hands, and there's always this moment every author gets to hold the book in their hands, and I did feel at this point in time that I'd moved to a different level, slightly higher up. You're kind of cruising along, and then you hit a kind of a rise, then you plateau for a while, then you rise, then you plateau. But when I looked back at that and I saw the book, it just felt it happened at the right time for the right reasons, and it took those other books to get to here. It wasn't
Mhm.
a diversion. If I look at my very first book, Get Lennon, it's 10 years old in June, just gone, 10 years old. And I look at how far I've come and how far I've evolved. That's the first time where I thought, yeah, I'm finally on the right track. I was almost there, but now I am. I'm on the right track. So that's
Mm.
exactly how I felt. It just, everything came together, but I had the time to really work on it without the distractions.
So, if you are on the right track, may we take it that we are going to be seeing more of this character?
Definitely. No, I definitely, because I've already drafted, I've an idea of how it's going to go on the next one. Uh, I have. I'm dreadful. I drive my wife mad with notebooks. I have notebooks stacked up all over the place. But I filled one notebook from cover to cover, and yeah, that's it. I'm going to go away for a few days. I'm going to just take a break, and then possibly in September start into it. But yeah, it's there. It's all in place. Yeah, I think I've got something.
Lovely. But because yeah, this could be fine. This could be a standalone. But to me, you know, I want to know what next. He's
Yeah,
one of those
yeah, yeah.
characters that like, so okay, so having been taken back out of that, like, what next? What's going to happen? So that's great news.
Yeah, no, there will be. Well, oddly enough, I had a Holt halfway finished, but I'm going to park that for the moment and just concentrate on getting the Crow out.
Hmm.
I suppose I'm not sure how many other writers would say this, but we're constantly juggling ideas. It's a bit like a conversation at a party. You've got one character tapping you on the shoulder, but then the other character tapping you on the other shoulder is a little more interesting. So Crow's a little more interesting at the moment, and that's the way I'm looking at it. But I think I'm sure any writer will tell you, particularly fiction writers, we're jostling ideas all the time. You're having conversations in your head with people that really don't exist except in your own head. But Crow's got more interesting conversations, I think, at the moment.
But then they get on the page, and that is beautiful. Now, that idea of the timing of things, and that, in the book, it's there, the reference to the pandemic that is coming, that,
Yeah,
that sadly, we have been living, but the book is set just when people are starting to talk about this and take precautions and think about, safe, being safe in
yeah, yeah,
out with
yeah.
others. Did you, I mean, because I know, for some authors, it's like, no, I'm not going to go there. I don't want to write, this moment in time. Were you not put off by that? Did you feel, no, this has to go in the novel?
I felt I had to go into the novel because it made it more of a ticking clock. One of the things that I needed in the book was to have some sort of sense of something ticking down in the background.
Hmm.
And yes, he's investigating a death. Yes, there may or may not be an element living in the town that are up to no good. But I needed something else in the background because you need to create some sort of. I wanted to root the book in the present, but also have a sense of something else coming along. That really part of Crow's voyage down into the town, along with being ferried to this kind of situation, is that there is a looming evil. Evil's too strong a word, but a looming crisis. It's
Hmm.
crisis upon
Yeah,
crisis upon
yeah,
crisis piled in on top. And that was the way I looked at doing it. I don't actually mention COVID. I just mention it as a
that's
kind
right.
of SARS or flu-like thing. So
Yeah.
I avoided using the word COVID. And I don't even do it when I'm doing when I'm promoting the book. I never use COVID at any part. It's just an element of an ongoing looming crisis, and it's fueling his paranoia a little bit further.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Now, there are two aspects that I want to ask you about that aren't about the content of the book, but
Right.
that have certainly helped form that content. And one you mentioned, you say huge thank you to Sue Proctor.
Yeah.
Who is
Sue
Sue
Proctor.
Proctor?
Oh, okay. Sue Proctor works for Think Forensic, and at one of the Murder One festivals in 2018, Think Forensic brought over this workshop. And what they do is that they do forensic science. So you could actually walk around this made-up laboratory along with a murder scene and reach your own conclusions. So they were handing out business cards, and I contacted them by email and I said, I have a particular situation I want to explore, and can you give me the forensic science behind it? So Sue came back straight away, excuse me, and said, what you need to know. And I wanted a drowning, but I wanted it not a drowning. It was a bit vague, but I told her exactly the premise
Hmm.
and I sent 2 chapters. She read the chapters and came back to me with all of the science behind it, which was great because then I could take Sue's language and put it into the state pathologist who's there with Crow, and she
Hmm.
just repeats everything back with Crow asking my questions, and Sue Proctor, the voice of Olivia Cutts. So they were brilliant. absolutely. Any question at all, they come back. But they were even better. They'd say, right, this is what would happen here. But if you did it this way, this gives it even that. So I had
Mm,
chapter 13 was just the whole Sue Proctor thing, but they were absolutely brilliant. And if you're a crime writer, I would recommend them because I really wanted this to feel accurate. I didn't
mm,
want it to be too grey. What I did want is the evidence is presented through a conversation and that it had to be right, or at least 90% right. And Think Forensic are a great resource and they're very obliging. I would recommend.
brilliant. Thank you for that. Now, that right at the end of the book, there is somebody else, and I loved your note about this. It's the author's note, and it's to your wife,
It is Fiona,
Fiona.
yeah.
Yeah, and her work with your editing. Has it? I mean, is it a smooth process, or you know,
I don't know.
does it?
You'd have to ask her. That's another conversation, another day's.
Yeah, okay.
It is a very. She's lived with my creativity for the past decade now.
Mm,
Extremely tolerant, but she took a huge interest in it. She loved the idea of story, but she loved the idea of Thea. She loved that
mm,
particular a sympathetic character, and through the whole process of not only writing but contacting and speaking to agents and trying to get a sort of a general interest going, she was there from the start. And night after night, she would sit there on the other side of the room with the manuscript and a pen, the dreaded green pen,
mm.
which it comes back. And she was brilliant, amazing, in fact. And I mean that. She did a great job. And she's very good at catching, you know, spelling mistakes, punctuation issues. And also, she's very good at drawing a big circle around something and saying, this does not make sense. Rewrite it and spell it out to me. And that's just, you need that. You do need that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that idea of somebody that you trust, I think that is wonderful. I really do. And you know, that idea of that it hasn't strained the marital bonds. I think that.
Well, no, there are a few frank exchange of views across the dinner table in the evenings, but yeah, she was. I don't understand why she can't just accept my genius and get on with
Yeah.
it. You know.
What's wrong? Okay. So I've got a last question,
Sure.
and it's about um the aspect of the crime gangs,
Right.
and whether you've put yourself in danger at researching this, or whether, you know, whether what we encounter in the pages is something that you have purely created yourself.
That's a good question. When I was in the 1980s around Dublin, I was playing in bands. I played a bass guitar and we did the pub circuit. And now and again, you'd rub shoulders with guys who were known for
Hmm.
their particular lifestyles. And I've never been in danger, but I've met people along the way, particularly through the music scene, who were, I suppose we call them dodgy,
Mm,
but Dublin had a unique relationship in the 80s and early 90s with criminals. They gave them all nicknames. We had like the Monk, the Penguin, the General. These are in Dublin. These are legends. And now and again, you'd rub up against a guy at a bar or whatever, and you'd know him as either the Monk or the General. But it goes back to my dad. He used to manage a betting shop in Dublin, and the General would come in with his brothers and have a bet on. So, dad would come home and say, oh, the General was in the shop, and you're kind of going, what? But, you know, you'd hear stories. But the characters that I've created, the character Teflon D, he's a
mm.
mix of individuals I met. I met a guy many years ago when we were playing gigs in Holland who lost his thumb. And he lost his thumb through an unpaid drugs bill. So that . Always stayed with me. So I morphed him into the character.
Oh, Robert, thank you so much for
No, my
taking
pleasure. Thank you.
time out to talk to us about
A
A
kind of
Kind of
drowning.
Drowning. Yeah, yeah, and for telling us, you know, insight into your characters, into this storyline, and the fabulous news that this is not the end of
No,
PJ
no.
Grow.
definitely
only
not.
the beginning. Yeah.
And thank you for having me on, Jackie. Really appreciate it.
A total pleasure, and I do hope that it's not another year until until we meet again,
Well,
please.
hopefully
Yeah,
I'll be at Newcastle 22 anyway.
that
One
would
way
be
or the other.
wonderful. Please do. Please.
Yep, I
Yeah.
will be there. Okay,
Okay.
listen, thank you. Take care.
Pleasure. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.